Hey guys, Mythic hero Ótr is here, and does he smell enough that he is worth your orbs? Let's find out.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is another in the Shoju Pull series featuring Mythic hero Ótr, who is an Anima Defense Blessing Mythic. And he is 7th unit, which means he now directly competes with the other Anima Mythic, which is Seiros. However, I kind of said this in my impressions video, despite him being a new Anima Mythic, and generally speaking, newer Mythics are usually better than old ones. This isn't always the case. In fact, Ótr is a fairly decent example of that, being like newer, but not necessarily better. He's okay, but I'll cover that in a different video where I rank the mythics. So this is a Shoju Pull video for Ótr and the banner itself, and I'm going to stick to that, but I will probably be featuring a new mythic like ranking throughout the next month. I think in October I'm going to cover that series of every single one, since we did recently just get Ótr here. Now, briefly, in comparison to Seiros, I do think that Ótr is better overall, like in a minor way. And to be honest, Seiros will age better if she's combined with newer mythics because of Wings of Light actually providing some supportive utility. However, she doesn't synergize well with the older mythics as much, such as Duma or Mira, where you're basically like, those guys are more supportive in nature, so Wings of Light doesn't do anything. But if you combine something like Seiros with Ótr, then it actually becomes pretty good, because then those extra stats she provides Ótr actually end up doing quite a bit. The real question though is whether Seiros would be as good as just having Mira on the team or Duma and just generally better mythics, and then Ótr just doing his own thing. So like overall, I'd say that Ótr is actually better than Seiros, and I'll try to explain why throughout this video, but it's not like such a huge difference that you should feel compelled to summon. That's like my takeaway from this, and hopefully that will get you started on this train of thought if you haven't summoned already, which hopefully you don't within minutes or hours of the banner being released, and you at least watch a video like this to give yourself an informed opinion. Anyways guys, so before we jump into the full meat of all this, even though I did kind of do a solid introduction there just to get you thinking, smash the like button, sub if you haven't already, and at the end of this video I do cover Patreon and Discord comments, where if you want to support the content we do, please highly consider in the description below to keep this content flowing. I appreciate anything you guys choose to do. Thank you so much. Alright, let's go. So, the banner itself. Again, I talked about this in the reactions impressions video from yesterday, so I may go review that if you want to, but essentially green and colorless are probably the most appealing to people here, and that's just because Ótr is new and he shares with some of the better things for the most part, which is Byleth and Celica. So if you're working on water or legendary cores, actually Celica is still pretty good in fire, I'd say, and Byleth is recently released as water. However, he's not necessarily like in demand considering how many good water options there are. Green statistically is better when it comes to summoning just because it's the least saturated pool, and I'll show you that in a moment. And Ótr, if you don't have 7th slot for Anima Defense, then he's going to be somewhat appealing. So if you didn't get Seiros for whatever reason, then Ótr is a decent idea to consider picking up. In colorless, we have Leaf, Shinnon, and Claude, and again, all of those are really good. They're all really good heroes, and Shinnon is basically the prime candidate for bow units, which he's sharing with. So that's why those two are most in demand, but again, this all depends on what merges you have on your heroes and what you need to do. So at this point, I can't really tell you, oh yeah, everyone needs to summon here. That most likely would happen on something like a Spark for a brand new mythic, like Not, or possibly a new book release where there's like everyone should be summoning. Something like this is conditional based on your own goals, and hopefully we can help you round those out throughout this video. So first thing we're going to talk about here is the actual statistics involved, and maybe you can't see that, so I'll just make it a little bigger here. But essentially, if you do plan to go for green on a legendary banner or mythic banner, it is statistically better than another color like colorless or red, or blue. And I believe it's about 10 to 15% better. So it's actually quite good when you consider how many orbs you might expend just to get a single copy. As you can see here, never assume that you're going to be the average result. Never assume you're just going to free summon something, because eventually, when you play long enough, you will hit the harsher situations, and that is where most people quit, because that's just how gacha is. So if you set your expectation correctly and assume you will be past the average results, then you'll be pleasantly surprised when you don't meet those. Don't try to do results-oriented thinking. Always consider your current orb count, what it'll be when a rerun happens, and what exactly you can choose to spend to give yourself either your favorite hero or progress your account in one manner or another. Consider about 300 F2P orbs a month, and if you have a disaster scenario, you could be recovering for months, right? So it is kind of a big deal, and that's why I can't always suggest that you look at these Mythic hero banners and say, oh yeah, I have to go for something and I have like 200 orbs, because generally speaking, that is quite a high risk to take. Anyways, let's talk about not that, but this, which is Ótr himself. So Ótr is, again, talked about this in Reactions Impressions video, but we reiterate. He's basically a bulky, defensive Mythic. Now, compared to Seiros, the biggest advantage that Ótr has is, of course, a pre-charge special, which doesn't require any sort of allies to function. I didn't mention this, I kind of briefly mentioned this, but the fact that he has a pre-charge special actually means that he could be taking even pulse ties from something like Legendary Sigurd, or potentially competing for it, which again, you could set up a different unit. So there's a little bit of strategy in that defense design, but what's more important is he's a cav. So being a cav is a huge advantage because you have more threat, more area to cover, more danger area, and compared to Seiros, who doesn't and is a dragon in Naga season, it's not as good. However, he has some flaws that I don't like, and they have to be addressed in this video, combined with the builds that we're going to talk about. So he comes with a weapon that has Canto and a follow-up with a little bit of attack, both denial and buff for himself, along with his special. His build that he comes with is basically G-Duel Cav, Flow Refresh, and Menace. It's fairly synergistic. He actually would appreciate the extra bulk and stats he gets from the Duel Cav skill. Everything there is used beyond speed, I'd say. And Flow Refresh does synergize with his weapon decently well. However, you got to consider that he's not going to necessarily be ready to take on things just with this build, so we have to really consider it on a more deeper level here. So, looking at the builds here, I wanted to bring to your attention different ways you could consider using him, which is his default build, but increasing his bulk by giving him something like AR Dad, attack defense, or potentially solo seal, or just merges and flowers, and some other ways of making him bulkier. Doing this, he likely will survive a lot of matchups and use his auto double to create pressure. I'm not totally convinced on this build, and I really don't like Canto on defense. Any encounters I've had with Sheeta or anyone using Trace on defense, it's actually been more of a meme matchup because Canto is used extremely defensively by AI, which means they'll like go in and rally and then run to like the far back way out of their teams. Like they're not threatening at that point. It actually gives the player who's playing into your team more space to deal with things. You want to create pressure, and Canto doesn't apply pressure. It can be used with nice gimmicks and rally traps where you like Canto in and then like the unit cantos to a side and then gets danced and that therefore catches something, but that's fairly complex and it may not even be worth it. In the case of something with Canto 3, like Ótr, he's more likely with a rally trap to just like rally something, and then if he gets danced and doesn't literally have a combat matchup, if he gets danced like after Canto, he's probably in his initial position where he rallied from. So you can see it's actually not that great at all. So not totally digging this weapon, which is actually why we're going to jump into an impact axe and a fire sweep axe, which are generally okay to use, I think. So with the impact axe, we recently got instant axe, and if you speed stack him enough, he can likely win or stalemate these sort of speed checks that come from impact versus auto doubles from enemies, especially something like Vector. It does require a bit of an investment, but I do think an instant axe impact is probably the way to actually go here. So you can get away from that whole gimmick of Kanto not actually helping much, speed stack him enough just to like match the sort of like speed of those that are auto doubling. And then with impact, he actually just survives, because the thing is with the bulk build, he actually ends up like dying to something like Vector. And I'll show you in a moment. I was thinking that this was the case, but he actually like loses with his default kit and wouldn't lose with an impact build, which is kind of funny. Again, same idea with Fire Sweep. You just want to create some sort of pressure. So Fire Sweep Axe, you don't have to worry about retaliation unless you run into null C units like Winter Altina, I guess. But again, none of those builds anyways would have survived against Winter Altina, so Fire Sweep at least works better against this sort of matchups he's supposed to cover. So use whatever fodder you have that works best with those appropriate builds, but I feel like any of those, if you end up with Ótr, are the way to go, especially the impact build. It's kind of a disappointment that his weapon didn't get impact, but to be honest, Kanto, again, is not a gimmick that I actually like on defense. And I haven't seen it be like, oh my god, I can't deal with this. It's not like Pathfinder, but again, it's whatever. So back to the final kind of consideration you could go with here for Ótr is actually just a arena build. So you don't have to actually keep Duel Cav 4, but I think that the bulk and overall stats he gets from it are totally fine. And honestly, his base kit is totally fine anyways. So Kanto in arena is actually pretty nice, and if you do end up committing to like a +10 Ótr, he's gonna work like Regan, but like a green unit, and that makes him pretty solid. Kanto is great when used on stuff like AR offense or arena, so this actually makes him a very good arena unit. He doesn't score that well, and he only gets like maybe one big nuke from his special, but generally speaking, he is a solid arena candidate to think about if you do bring him up to this high of an investment level. This probably won't apply to most people, so it's not really worth stressing over or thinking about too much. What I want to talk about here is the simulations and why something like Ótr is potentially, in my opinion, better than something like Seiros. So the simulation hasn't updated it with Ótr yet, but honestly, Veronica is a fairly similar comparison, reducing attack, having auto doubles, that kind of thing. So same kind of scenario here, similar stat spread, a couple points difference, but generally speaking, I wanted to show you guys what was going here. So this would be a standard like +1 vector they run into, running Bonfire, Special Fighter Boost, versus essentially what Ótr is with a bulky AR DAD build, flow refresh, and solo. So essentially mostly base kit. Precharge Luna is to, again, compared to that whole in Luna that he has, because that's essentially what his thing does. So you'll see an unsupported vector dies, like no problem, because, well, it was kind of like Ótr is designed to actually kind of kill those blue units that rely on that. It's kind of like another vector counter, and this is why I have to put in these quotes here, because it's a vector counter or like a soft counter, but in reality, you're not going to run into players who aren't investing hard into their vector. Like, they're going to actually support him well. They're going to put some sort of things behind him like Corrin, Flames, save balls, just extremely high supportive. And this is where things get tricky, because as soon as you consider what's going on, well, yeah, the complete opposite happens here, and you don't even bring vector under half in a standard save ball. So save ball would be something that's like buffing up vector, 6 to all stats maybe, flame or niffle, and stacking close and distant guards and drives and such. And when you think about that, Ótr kinda isn't that great. He does take a decent chunk of like damage, like he does a decent chunk of damage and is able to like inflict and hurt vector pretty well. But I doubt that most defenses are going to be running multiple nukes where vector is basically going to die through this. So the hard counter isn't hard enough, and I actually believe that just honestly running something like an impact weapon is going to do more to just create pressure on the follow-up turns, where you're still getting your big nuke from the special because the weapon doesn't interact with the special, but the unit can survive, so Ótr survives, and then potentially pressure on the follow-up turns, or he's hard to kill because he has more bulk and such. So things like that are kind of really important to consider. I just wanted to showcase the Vector example here because Ótr isn't necessarily a hard counter. You just need a little bit of support on Vector and he completely smashes him, and that's just how it is. I've actually been using my Vector against stuff like Summer Shida and Flying Hinoka, and if you just consider that you just like buff and debuff the enemies, it ends up being like those counters aren't really counters to him, which is funny. It goes a long way to actually counter Vector. All right, so the last thing on today's video, of course, from the Shoju poll, is the community's perspective on this sort of thing. So let's do it. If you guys don't know, I put up 2 polls, one on my Patreon and one on YouTube. Again, as I expected, fairly similar. It pretty much always is. You know, there's going to be people who have a lot of favorites, and there's going to be people who probably want like fodder, like G Duel Cav or Deadeye or something, or maybe just a few merges. And then most people, I'd say, are skipping. So this is one of those like situational banners for most players, which is good. I like to see this sort of thing. It means that you guys are keeping to your goals and making sure you think long term, and not every single banner is a bait banner. So that would say that. But of course, we'll go into some examples of what everyone thinks, starting with Enrath here from the Discord. So poor Gunnthra players, man. I know that Enrath uses Gunnthra, so this is of course going to be fitting that. Gunnthra demands sacrifices, so going for 1 G-Duel. Celica is cute, and Byleth isn't the worst. If by some miracle G-Duel Cav 4 reruns in November, I'd summon for it then. Overall banner is pretty bad for me, but it could always be worse. So yeah, we have confirmation that Ótr comes back in January, so not November, unfortunately, on Wrath, but again, any Gunnthra player or even Cecilia player feels bad that like the Mythic banner ends up taking G-Duel Cav form. Another Gunnthra player, so Emu here. Opium, one with just a bid option. Banner has G-Duel Cav and I have Gunnthra. What choice do I really have? I will say though, it's super scummy to lock an arena's dual scale to a Mythic. I really, like, I haven't said this, but I will cover G-Duel Cav 4 in another video sometime this week, hopefully. And yeah, it's dumb. Like we had I don't know why, but we have like Sparkable dual skills. We have seasonal dual skills, and now they just released G-Duel Cav 4 on a Mythic who doesn't even need it in his build, even if you plus 10'd him. So it's clearly as a sort of bait to say, please summon and fodder him to, you know, a very important like legendary, like Gunnthra, for example, who recently got buffed too. So this is unfortunate, and I feel you. These are likely the yes, just a bit options on our poll because you feel compelled, and unfortunately you gotta gamble it. I personally was even considering Gunnthra as a merge project for myself as a second win legendary, and Ótr, well, he crushed those dreams. Another comment by Drabe here says, big skip for me, glad Ótr is a defense mythic because he would have been almost too good to not have an offense, kind of like Regan. Also, I'm not a fan of his character or his art and design. Solid opinion. Yeah, I mean, Ótr is, again, what I mentioned earlier, he's a defense mythic, and some heroes are just better offensively. Like, this is actually a prime example of Sothis genuinely being a better offensive unit, like a great arena unit, or potentially could have been really good on air offense because of her dragon weakness being eliminated and having like a distant counter weapon. Well, that would have been better when she was released, but generally speaking, those sort of like characters are better offensively than they are defensively. Ótr is okay on defense, but he's like gonna be really good in arena, and if he was an air offense unit, he would have been amazing, similar to how Regan is. So you have Seiros, it's basically like you don't need Ótr, but if you didn't pick up Seiros, then Ótr is generally better than what Seiros is. Final comment by Amber on YouTube says, I want 5 Ótrs ideally. 2 Green Duel Cavs 4 for Cecilia and Gunnthra. Feels bad, man. 1 Menace to help Pledging Axe Anna get kills. That's interesting. And 1 Flow Refresh for Bridocatria, and 1 to put on defense. That's a lot of fodder and a lot of summoning. I hope you're totally ready for that, by the way. Yet I still won't pull because I don't want Celica and Byleth. It's only good for times pulls for me. I want a lot of Ótr copies, but I'll wait for a banner with better greens for me, like Dagger or Legendary Edelgard. Okay, so this is great fundamentals for playing long term. So you see something you need, but now you can plan ahead. Ótr comes back in January. He likely will come back later in the year, and you want to really wait for that ideal banner where the other 2 units he shares with don't suck, so you can get the best value from your orbs when it takes a lot of summons to get that sort of thing. So yeah, guys, that basically covers everything about Ótr. Thank you for participating in the polls and offering your opinions. I'm glad to share that with you guys, and hopefully you guys take something out of this and formulate your own judgments, opinions, goals, whatever it is you take out of this, and improve your game. I'm happy to do it, and looking forward, we're going to definitely cover Duel Cav 4. We're going to cover the Mythic rankings now that we have Ótr in the game on all seasons. That'll be a project for the next month, so look forward to that. And yeah, that's it. If you haven't followed Twitter or Twitch, I just want to let you guys know quickly that I am streaming Three Houses almost daily now, almost daily. So if you're into that, maddening, Blue Lions, pretty fun. And in October, I'm also doing a Halloween stream month where I'm going to be playing Resident Evil Remake 2, as that was voted in by Twitter and my community. So if you want to check those out and see some epic reactions, then do so. Finally, smash the like button, sub if you haven't already. Consider supporting the content in the Patreon description below. Love you all. See you in the next one. Peace.
It's over.